James Walker stared at his best friend across a conference room littered with coffee cups and crumpled presentation slides. The joke had slipped out, just marry me, born from exhaustion and 3 years of late nights together. He'd laughed. She hadn't. Instead, Olivia's eyes filled with tears as she whispered words that would shatter everything he thought he knew. I thought you'd never ask. In that moment, James realized the woman he'd called his work wife for years had been in love with him all along. And worse, he might have been in love with her too. I invite you to follow this story to the end, hit the like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. The fluorescent lights of Morrison and Associates hummed their usual monotonous tune as James Walker pushed through the glass doors at 7:45 on a Monday morning, exactly 15 minutes before his shift officially began. At 32, he'd learned that those 15 minutes were sacred, time to settle in, check his daughter's schedule on his phone one more time, and mentally prepare for whatever corporate chaos the day would throw at him. His daughter, Emma, was 6 years old now. 6 years of bedtime stories, ponytails he still couldn't quite master, parent-teacher conferences, and an endless rotation of chicken nuggets because vegetables were apparently the enemy. 6 years of doing it alone. Well, mostly alone. You look like death warmed over, a familiar voice called from the break room as James poured his first coffee of the morning. He glanced up to find Olivia Bennett leaning against the doorframe, her own mug in hand, dark hair pulled back in that efficient ponytail she always wore on Mondays. She had on her navy blazer, the one she claimed made her look more authoritative in meetings, and her expression carried that particular blend of amusement and concern he'd come to recognize over the past 3 years. Emma had a nightmare at 2 in the morning, James said, adding his usual excessive amount of cream to the coffee. Something about a dragon living in her closet. Took an hour to convince her it was just her winter coats. Did you check the closet? Olivia asked, stepping into the break room. Twice. Then I had to reorganize her stuffed animals by size to prove nothing was hiding behind them. Olivia laughed, that genuine sound that somehow made the sterile office feel a little warmer. You know she's playing you, right? Emma's got you wrapped around her tiny finger. I'm aware, James admitted, heading toward his desk. Doesn't change the fact that I can't say no to her. They walked together through the maze of cubicles, their desks positioned side by side in a corner that caught morning light through the large windows. It was a good spot, quieter than the main floor, close enough to the conference rooms but far enough from the executive offices to avoid constant supervision. 3 years ago, when James had first started at Morrison and Associates, he'd been a mess. Fresh out of a devastating divorce, full custody of Emma, trying to navigate a new job while figuring out how to be both mother and father to a 3-year-old who kept asking when mommy was coming home. The answer, never, had been too complicated to explain to a toddler. His first week had been overwhelming. The company's project management software seemed designed by someone who hated human beings. The filing system made no logical sense, and everyone around him seemed to move with an efficiency he couldn't match, speaking in acronyms he didn't understand, referencing clients and protocols he'd never heard of. He'd been drowning. And then he'd met Olivia. She'd been drowning too, just in a different way. I've read this manual 3 times, she'd said during their second day of training, sitting across from him in a windowless conference room while their trainer droned on about compliance procedures. I still have no idea what a TPS report actually is. James had looked up from his own stack of incomprehensible paperwork. I thought I was the only one completely lost. You're definitely not alone, she'd replied, and something about the relief in her voice had made him feel instantly better. They'd bonded over confusion first, then over bad coffee and worse cafeteria sandwiches. Olivia had just moved to the city from across the country, leaving behind everything familiar for what was supposed to be a career opportunity. But the reality of corporate life had hit hard. Long hours, competitive colleagues, and the kind of loneliness that came from being surrounded by people but known by none. By the end of their first month, they'd developed a system. James would explain the technical aspects of their project management software. His background in analytics made that part intuitive, and Olivia would help him navigate the social complexities of office politics, something his introverted nature struggled with. You need to speak up more in meetings, she'd told him one afternoon. You have good ideas, but if you don't voice them, someone else will take credit. I don't want to seem aggressive, he'd countered. There's a difference between aggressive and assertive. You're allowed to take up space, James. It was advice he'd taken to heart, though implementing it remained a work in progress. Their friendship had solidified during their first major project together, a client presentation that had required 2 weeks of 16-hour days. They'd divided the work based on their strengths. James handled data analysis and financial projections, while Olivia managed client communications and visual design. The night before the presentation, around 11 p.m., they'd both been exhausted beyond reason, surviving on coffee and determination. If this fails, I'm moving to Alaska and becoming a fisherman, James had said, staring at spreadsheets until the numbers blurred together. You get seasick in swimming pools, Olivia had pointed out, not looking up from her laptop where she was adjusting slide layouts for the 100th time. Fine, I'll become a mountain hermit. You'd miss Emma too much. She'd been right, of course. She was usually right about things like that. The presentation had been a success. Their client had signed a contract extension worth millions. Their manager had publicly praised their teamwork. And James had realized something important. Olivia wasn't just a colleague he got along with. She was becoming essential to his daily survival. Coffee before work had started the second month. James would arrive early, get 2 cups, his with excessive cream, hers black with 2 sugars, and they'd have 15 minutes to talk about anything except work. Sometimes Olivia would share stories about her disastrous attempts at dating in a new city. Sometimes James would vent about the challenges of single parenthood or share funny things Emma had said. She asked me yesterday if I was old, James had told her one morning. Olivia had nearly spit out her coffee. What did you say? I said 32 wasn't old. She said her friend's dad is 26, so clearly I'm ancient. Kids are brutal. She also asked why I don't have a wife like other dads. Olivia's expression had shifted slightly, something James couldn't quite read crossing her face. What did you tell her? That families come in all different shapes, that she and I are a complete family just as we are. He'd paused, staring into his coffee. I don't know if she really understands. She's so young. She will, Olivia had said quietly. You're doing an amazing job, James. Emma's lucky to have you. The compliment had meant more than it should have. By their first anniversary at the company, they'd become known as the dynamic duo. If you needed James, you checked Olivia's desk first. If you wanted Olivia, James probably knew her schedule. They finished each other's sentences in meetings. They divided projects with an efficiency that made their managers constantly pair them together. You two should just get married, their coworker Derek had joked one afternoon in the break room, loud enough for half the office to hear. You're already acting like an old married couple. James had laughed it off, as he always did. Olivia has way better taste than to settle for me. But he'd noticed Olivia hadn't laughed. She'd just returned to her desk quietly, and he'd wondered if the joke had bothered her somehow. The work spouse comments had become routine. James had heard variations of it dozens of times, from colleagues, from his own manager during performance reviews, even from his sister during their weekly phone calls. So when are you going to ask out this Olivia you're always talking about? His sister had asked directly. It's not like that, James had insisted. We're friends. Good friends. I can't afford to mess that up. Uh-huh. And how many of your actual dates have you compared to her? I don't compare them to her. James, last month you told me your date was fine, but she didn't understand project management humor. What does that even mean? He'd changed the subject. The truth was, dating as a single father had proven nearly impossible. The few times he'd tried, usually at Olivia's encouragement, had ended in polite goodbyes and mutual acknowledgement that the chemistry wasn't there. He'd bring Emma along to afternoon dates at the park, and the women would try too hard to connect with his daughter, or not try at all. Neither felt right. One woman had actually said, I'm not really a kid person, on their second date, and James had known immediately it wouldn't work. Because Emma wasn't just part of his life. She was his entire life. And anyone who couldn't understand that wasn't someone he could build a future with. Olivia understood, though. She'd met Emma by accident 6 months into their friendship when James had to bring his daughter to the office during a childcare emergency. Emma had been shy at first, hiding behind James's legs, but Olivia had crouched down to her level and asked about the stuffed rabbit she was carrying. "This is Mr. Floppity," Emma had said seriously. "He's very old and very wise." "He looks very distinguished," Olivia had replied with equal seriousness. "Does he like coloring? I have some markers at my desk." They'd spent an hour coloring together while James frantically finished a report. When he'd finally looked up, Emma had been showing Olivia her artwork, a chaotic explosion of colors that might have been a unicorn or possibly a dog, and Olivia had been genuinely enthusiastic about every detail. "You're really good with her," James had said later, after Emma had fallen asleep in the chair beside his desk, exhausted from the unexpected adventure. "She's a great kid," Olivia had replied. "You've done an incredible job raising her." After that, Emma had asked about Olivia regularly. When was Miss Olivia coming over? Could they invite her to the park? Did she like pizza? James had been careful about maintaining boundaries. Olivia was his friend and colleague, not a parental figure in Emma's life. But somehow, gradually, she'd become woven into their routine anyway. She'd attend Emma's school performances if James mentioned them. She'd remember Emma's birthday and bring thoughtful gifts. Once, when Emma had been sick and James had been stuck in an unavoidable meeting, Olivia had volunteered to sit with her for an hour, reading stories and keeping her company. "You don't have to do this," James had said, grateful but guilty. "I know," Olivia had replied. "I want to." By their second year working together, late nights had become normal. Morrison and Associates ran on deadlines that seemed designed to destroy work-life balance, and both James and Olivia had proven themselves capable enough that they were consistently assigned high-priority projects. "We're being rewarded for our competence with more work," Olivia had observed dryly one evening as they reviewed yet another client proposal. "Welcome to capitalism," James had muttered, highlighting a section that needed revision. "At least we're suffering together." And they were. When deadlines loomed, they'd order takeout and work until midnight. When presentations went wrong, they'd debrief over coffee and figure out what to fix. When office politics turned toxic, they'd vent to each other in careful whispers. Olivia had become his safe place in a demanding corporate environment. She reminded him of meetings he'd inevitably forget. His organizational skills were questionable at best. She'd proofread his emails before he sent them to executives, catching the casual tone that didn't quite fit formal communications. She'd cover for him when Emma's school called with emergencies, telling their manager that James was handling an urgent client issue while he rushed to pick up his daughter. In return, James protected Olivia in his own ways. He'd step in when colleagues interrupted her in meetings, making sure her ideas were heard. He'd defend her work when others tried to take credit. He'd walk her to her car after late shifts because the parking garage had terrible lighting and he worried about her safety. "You don't have to do this every time," she'd said one evening. "I know," he'd replied, echoing her words from months earlier. "I want to." They had unspoken agreements about dozens of small things. James would grab lunch for both of them when Olivia was swamped. Olivia would make sure James actually took his vacation days instead of letting them expire. They'd cover each other's weaknesses and amplify each other's strengths. "You two are codependent," Derek had commented once, not entirely joking. Maybe they were, but James didn't see how that was a problem. His daughter adored Olivia. His work performance had improved dramatically since they'd partnered on projects. His stress levels were manageable because he had someone who understood the pressure. His life, which had felt chaotic and overwhelming 3 years ago, now had a rhythm and stability he desperately needed. Why would he risk that? During their third year, James started noticing things he'd trained himself to ignore. The way Olivia's smile would fade when he mentioned dates with other women. The careful distance she'd maintain for a few days afterward. The way she'd throw herself into work when he talked about maybe trying a dating app again. Once, when she'd started seeing someone from the accounting department, a guy named Marcus, who seemed nice enough, James had felt an unexpected twist in his chest when they'd had lunch together in the cafeteria. "Marcus seems decent," he'd said to her later, trying to sound supportive. "He is," Olivia had agreed, her tone neutral. "You should go for it. You deserve someone great." "Thanks, James." But she'd sounded sad and he hadn't understood why. The relationship with Marcus had lasted 6 weeks. When it ended, Olivia had mentioned it casually. We wanted different things, and returned to their normal routine. James had felt relieved, though he told himself it was just because he'd missed their lunch conversations. He was lying to himself. On some level, he'd known he was lying, but the alternative was terrifying. Emma depended on him. His job required stability. His carefully constructed life couldn't handle another emotional catastrophe. He'd barely survived his divorce, the betrayal, the custody battle, the complete restructuring of his identity from husband to single father. He couldn't risk Olivia, not when losing her would feel like losing oxygen. So he kept their relationship in a safe category, friendship. Best friendship, even. The kind where you knew each other's coffee orders and covered each other's shifts and celebrated small victories together. Just friendship. Nothing more. He repeated it to himself every time Olivia stayed late to help him with a project she wasn't assigned to. Every time she texted to check if Emma was feeling better after a cold. Every time she laughed at his terrible jokes in meetings when everyone else just stared. Just friends. Even when her hand would brush his while reaching for the same file, and he'd feel that jolt of awareness he immediately suppressed. Even when she'd lean over his desk to point out something on his screen, and he'd catch the scent of her shampoo, something light and floral, and have to forcibly redirect his attention. Even when she'd smile at him across the conference table, that particular smile that seemed reserved just for him, warm and genuine and understanding, just friends, because anything else was impossible. You know what your problem is, Olivia had said one evening during their 3rd year, when they'd been working late on a proposal that was due the next morning. I have several problems, James had replied, not looking up from his spreadsheet. You'll need to be more specific. You're afraid of risk. That had made him pause. Excuse me? In work, in life, in everything. You stick to what's safe and proven. You never take chances. That's not true. I took a chance on this job. After researching the company for 3 months and reading hundreds of employee reviews. That's not taking a chance, James. That's risk mitigation. He turned to face her fully. Is there something wrong with being careful? No. She'd held his gaze, and something in her expression had been difficult to read. But sometimes the safest choice isn't actually safe at all. Sometimes it's just slow motion loss. What does that mean? She'd looked away. Nothing. Forget it. Let's finish this proposal. They'd worked in silence for the next hour, and James had tried to decode what she'd meant. But eventually, the deadline had demanded his full attention, and the moment had passed. Now, 3 years into their friendship, James had built a life that felt stable and manageable. He had his job, his daughter, and his best friend. Emma was thriving in 1st grade. His career was progressing steadily. He'd established routines that worked. Every morning, coffee with Olivia, discuss the day ahead, divide tasks efficiently. Every evening, pick up Emma, make dinner, help with homework, bedtime stories, then often back to his laptop to finish work while Olivia did the same from her apartment across town, their ongoing group chat keeping them connected even when physically apart. Every weekend, Emma's activities, grocery shopping, cleaning, laundry, and usually at least one work email from Olivia about Monday's priorities. It was a good life, a safe life. But on Thursday evenings, when they'd inevitably end up working late because Fridays brought executive reviews, James would notice how the office emptied around them, how the silence settled into something comfortable rather than oppressive, how they'd developed their own rhythm. Olivia would print documents while James reviewed digital files. They'd swap tasks without speaking, and they'd finish projects with an efficiency that their managers constantly praised. You two make everyone else look bad, their manager had said during their last performance review. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. What they were doing was understanding each other completely, anticipating needs, filling gaps, operating as a single unit despite being 2 separate people. Just friends, James reminded himself, even though his sister had stopped believing that explanation. Even though Derek waggled his eyebrows suggestively every time they walked into a meeting together. Even though Emma had started asking why Miss Olivia didn't live with them like other families. Because we're not that kind of family, sweetheart, James had explained patiently. But you like each other, Emma had insisted with 6-year-old logic. You smile more when she's around. He couldn't argue with that observation, but he also couldn't afford to examine it too closely. The Thursday that changed everything started like any other. Coffee at 7:45. Brief discussion of their schedules. Division of the day's priorities. Then they'd separated to their individual tasks, coming together for a late morning meeting about a new client presentation that had been assigned to them the day before. The client was significant, a potential contract worth millions, and the presentation needed to be perfect. They had until Monday morning, which meant sacrificing their weekend, but that had become standard practice. I can handle the financial projections, James had offered during the meeting with their manager. And I'll manage the visual design and client research, Olivia had added. Their manager had nodded approvingly. I'm putting you two on this because I trust you. Don't let me down. No pressure at all. They'd worked through lunch, through the afternoon, through the dinner hour. By 8 p.m., most of the office had emptied. By 9, it was just them and the cleaning crew. By 10, even the cleaning crew had finished and departed. The conference room they'd claimed had become a disaster zone. Coffee cups littered the table. Papers were spread across every available surface. 2 laptops sat open, screens glowing with half-finished slides and complex spreadsheets. James's eyes hurt from staring at numbers. His shoulders ached from hunching over his keyboard. His brain felt like it was operating through fog. Olivia looked equally exhausted, her earlier efficiency replaced by the kind of punchy delirium that came from working too many hours on too little sleep. I can't remember if we already included the Q3 projections or if I'm imagining that we did, James said, rubbing his temples. We did. Slide 17. You made them blue instead of red because you said red felt too aggressive. See, this is why I need you. You're like my external memory drive. Olivia smiled, but it looked tired. We make a good team. The best team. They worked in silence for another 30 minutes, the clock creeping past 10:30. James could feel his concentration slipping. Every number started looking the same. Every slide needed 17 more revisions. The project felt endless. We should call it, Olivia said finally. We're not doing quality work anymore. We're just moving pixels around and hoping it looks better. Probably wise. James saved his file and closed his laptop. We can come in early tomorrow and finish with fresh eyes. Sounds like a plan, but neither of them moved. The conference room had become a bubble, separate from the real world. Out there, responsibilities waited. Single parenthood, empty apartments, the pressure of Monday's deadline. In here, it was just them and the comfortable silence of shared exhaustion. Can I ask you something? Olivia said quietly. Of course. Do you ever think about what your life would look like if you weren't so careful all the time? James frowned. What do you mean? You're always protecting yourself, planning for worst-case scenarios, making sure you have backup plans for your backup plans. She turned to face him fully. Don't you ever just want to do something impulsive? Impulsive is how I ended up married at 24 to someone I barely knew. Impulsive is what led to a divorce that nearly destroyed me. Impulsive isn't my friend, Olivia. There's a difference between impulsive and brave. Is there? Yes. Her voice was soft but certain. Being brave means acknowledging the risk and choosing to try anyway. Being impulsive means not thinking about consequences at all. James studied her face, trying to understand what she was really asking. Why are you bringing this up? She looked away. No reason. I'm just tired and philosophical. Ignore me. But he couldn't ignore the tension in her shoulders or the way she wouldn't meet his eyes. The moment stretched between them, filled with words neither was saying. And then James, running on empty and exhausted beyond rational thought, made a joke that would change everything. He leaned back in his chair, gestured at the chaos surrounding them, and said with a tired laugh, "Forget this presentation. Just marry me. At least then we'd be legally obligated to survive this corporate nightmare together." He expected her to laugh. She didn't. Instead, her eyes filled with tears. James felt his smile freeze on his face as he watched a single tear slide down Olivia's cheek. The conference room suddenly felt too small, too quiet, the hum of the overhead lights deafening in the silence that followed his joke. "Olivia?" His voice came out uncertain, concerned. I thought you'd never ask," she whispered. The words hit him like a physical blow. James sat up straighter, his exhaustion evaporating in an instant. replaced by a creeping sense of dread mixed with something else he couldn't quite name. His heart started pounding against his ribs. What? Olivia pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to hold back tears that were already falling. Her shoulders shook slightly, and James realized with growing horror that she was crying, actually crying, and he had no idea what to do. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I shouldn't. This isn't how I wanted. Olivia, talk to me." James stood up, moving around the table toward her, but stopped a few feet away, uncertain. "What's going on?" She lowered her hands, and the look in her eyes made his chest tighten. It was raw and vulnerable and filled with something that looked terrifyingly like hope mixed with despair. "I can't do this anymore," she said quietly. "I can't keep pretending." "Pretending what?" "That I don't love you." The conference room tilted. James gripped the back of a chair to steady himself, his mind racing through the last 3 years at impossible speed. Coffee every morning, late nights, shared lunches, her hand on his arm when he was stressed. The way she remembered everything about Emma, the careful distance she maintained when he dated other women, the sadness in her eyes when he'd call her his best friend. "How long?" he managed to ask. Olivia laughed, but it was a broken sound. 2 years, maybe longer. I don't even know anymore. It happened gradually, and then all at once. And suddenly I was in love with my best friend, who saw me as nothing more than a convenient work partner. That's not true. You're not just... Every time you made a joke about us being work spouses, it hurt, she continued, the words spilling out like she couldn't stop them now that she'd started. Every time you mentioned another woman, another date, another failed attempt to find someone, I wanted to scream that I was right here, that I'd been here the whole time. James felt like he couldn't breathe. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you made it clear you didn't see me that way. Because you have Emma to think about and you couldn't afford complications. Because I valued our friendship too much to ruin it with my feelings." She wiped at her tears angrily. "Because I'm a coward who hoped that maybe, eventually, you'd notice." "Olivia, do you know how many times you've joked about marrying me?" Her voice rose slightly, emotion making it shake. "Dozens, maybe hundreds. Every single time it felt like you were dangling this impossible thing in front of me and then laughing it off like it was absurd. Like the idea of being with me was just a punchline to lighten the mood during a stressful project." The accusation stung because there was truth in it. James had made those jokes. He'd laughed them off. He'd never considered how they might land for someone who actually harbored feelings for him. "I didn't know," he said weakly. "I know you didn't. That almost makes it worse." Olivia stood up, putting more distance between them, wrapping her arms around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. "I watched you go on dates with women who were wrong for you. Women who didn't understand your humor or appreciate your dedication to Emma. Women who couldn't see how amazing you are because they only met you once or twice." "They didn't work out," James said, his voice rough. "No, they didn't. And every time one failed, part of me was relieved, and I hated myself for it. What kind of person roots for their best friend to stay lonely? You're not a bad person. I'm in love with someone who doesn't love me back. That makes me pathetic." "Don't say that." James moved closer, reaching for her, but Olivia stepped back. "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't comfort me out of guilt or pity. I can't handle that right now." They stood on opposite sides of the conference table, the physical distance between them feeling symbolic of something much larger. James's mind was spinning, trying to process information that contradicted everything he'd believed about their relationship. Olivia loved him, had loved him for 2 years. While he'd been carefully maintaining boundaries and protecting himself from risk, she'd been suffering in silence, watching him date other women, hiding her feelings behind supportive friendship. "Say something," Olivia said when the silence stretched too long. "Please just say something." "I don't know what to say." "The truth. That's all I want. Just tell me the truth." James ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd never managed to break. "This is a lot to process." "I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. The joke just broke something in me. 3 years of pretending and one stupid joke about marriage, and I just couldn't keep it in anymore." "It wasn't a stupid joke," James said quietly. "I meant it as a joke, but what?" He struggled to find words for feelings he'd spent 3 years refusing to examine. But maybe part of me wasn't entirely joking. Olivia's breath caught. What does that mean? I don't know, James admitted, and it was the truth. His carefully organized mind, so good at spreadsheets and data analysis, couldn't make sense of the chaos of emotions currently flooding through him. You're my best friend. You're the person I think about first when something good happens. You're who I want to talk to when everything goes wrong. You fit into my life and Emma's life like you've always belonged there. That's friendship, James. That's not... Let me finish. He held up a hand. When you dated Marcus, I was jealous. I told myself it was just protective friendship, but I couldn't stand seeing you with him. Every time you mentioned him, I wanted to list all the reasons he wasn't good enough for you. He was a perfectly nice guy. Exactly. Perfectly nice. Not special. Not someone who deserved you. James met her eyes across the table. No one I've ever met has seemed good enough for you, because you're brilliant and kind, and you remember details about people that they don't even remember about themselves. You make everyone around you better just by being in their orbit. James, and maybe I've been too scared to admit that when I picture my future, you're in it. Not just as my friend or colleague, but as someone permanent. Someone who stays. Olivia pressed her hand to her mouth, fresh tears streaming down her face. But I can't, James continued, his voice breaking. I can't risk this. Do you understand? If I let myself feel what I think I'm feeling and it goes wrong, I don't just lose a relationship. I lose my best friend. Emma loses someone she's come to care about. My whole life falls apart. So you'd rather we just pretend this conversation never happened? Olivia's voice was thick with tears. Go back to being work friends who joke about marriage while I die a little inside every time? I don't know what I'd rather. I'm terrified, Olivia. You think I'm not? She let out a shaky laugh. I just confessed my feelings to someone who might not feel the same way. I've potentially ruined the most important friendship in my life. I'm absolutely terrified. They stared at each other across the disaster of their unfinished presentation, 3 years of carefully maintained boundaries crumbling between them. What do you want from me? James asked finally. Right now, in this moment, what do you need? Olivia wrapped her arms tighter around herself. I need to know if there's even a possibility, because if there's not, if you genuinely only see me as a friend and nothing more, then I need to know that so I can figure out how to move forward. And if I don't know the answer, then you need to figure it out, because I can't keep doing this halfway thing where we act like a couple in every way except the one that actually matters. The accusation hung in the air. James wanted to argue, to defend their friendship as something pure and uncomplicated, but he couldn't, because she was right. They did act like a couple. Everyone else saw it. His sister saw it. Emma saw it. Probably the entire office saw it. Everyone except him had been willing to call it what it was. I need time, he said. Olivia nodded, wiping at her tears. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What else can I say, James? I've laid everything out. I've been vulnerable in a way I swore I'd never be. The ball is entirely in your court now. She grabbed her bag from the chair. I'm going home. We can finish the presentation tomorrow. Olivia, wait. I need space right now, please. She walked toward the door, and James felt panic rise in his chest. If she left like this, something fundamental would shift between them, and he wasn't ready for that shift. I don't want to lose you, he said desperately. Olivia paused in the doorway, her back to him. Then don't. Figure out what you actually want, not what's safe or convenient or least risky. Figure out what you want. She left. James stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by their abandoned work, and tried to process what had just happened. His hands were shaking. His heart was racing. His mind was replaying every moment of the last 3 years through a completely different lens. Had she been in love with him during their first major project together? When they'd worked until midnight, and he'd joked about becoming a hermit? When she'd said he'd miss Emma too much, had there been longing in her voice he'd been too oblivious to hear? What about the coffee every morning? He'd thought it was just routine. Had she been waking up early, making sure to arrive before him, just for those 15 minutes of conversation? The way she checked on Emma when she was sick? Was that friendship or something deeper? Every walk to her car after late shifts, every time she'd remembered his preferences without him having to ask. Every moment she'd anticipated his needs before he voiced them. Had it all been love? James sank into a chair, his head in his hands. He'd spent 3 years protecting himself from risk, from the possibility of getting hurt again. His divorce had been devastating. The betrayal of discovering his wife had been having an affair, the brutal custody battle, the complete destruction of the future he'd imagined. He'd rebuilt his life carefully, methodically, with Emma as his central focus and everything else secondary. Olivia had slipped past his defenses because he'd categorized her as safe. Friendship didn't require vulnerability. Friendship couldn't devastate him the way romance could. Except it could. Because the thought of losing Olivia, of Monday morning arriving and not having coffee together, of working on projects alone, of not having her in his and Emma's life, that devastated him. He pulled out his phone and stared at their message history. Hundreds of conversations, thousands of messages. Work questions blending into personal updates, blending into inside jokes, blending into an intimacy he'd refused to name. The last message was from this afternoon. Conference room 3B is free if you want to spread out. Claimed it for us. Claimed it for us? Such a simple phrase, but it contained an assumption of partnership, of shared space, of us as a unit. James scrolled back further, reading messages with new understanding. Emma's school play is next Thursday at 6. No pressure, but you'd be welcome if you want to come. She'd come. She'd sat next to him and cheered when Emma had forgotten her line, but recovered beautifully. She'd brought flowers for Emma afterward. Rough day. Need to vent. Coffee tomorrow before the morning meeting? They'd talked for 45 minutes about her frustration with a condescending client. He'd made her laugh, reminded her how capable she was, offered to review her approach before the next meeting. Thanks for walking me to my car last night. I know you think the parking garage isn't that dangerous, but it makes me feel safer. You're a good friend. A good friend. The phrase appeared over and over in their messages. You're such a good friend. I'm lucky to have a friend like you. Thanks for being a good friend. Had those messages hurt her to write? Had she been trying to convince herself that friendship was enough? James's phone buzzed. A new message from his sister. How's the big presentation going? Try not to work too late. Even workaholics need sleep. He typed back without thinking. Olivia's in love with me. 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, reappeared. His phone rang. Explain, his sister said without preamble. James did. He told her about the joke, about Olivia's confession, about 2 years of hidden feelings and his complete obliviousness. He told her about the jealousy he'd felt when she dated Marcus. He told her about the fear currently paralyzing him. His sister listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Are you in love with her? She asked finally. I don't know. James, don't lie to yourself. Are you in love with her? He thought about Olivia's laugh, the way she pulled her hair back on Mondays, how she made his daughter light up, the relief he felt every morning when he arrived at work and saw her already there, the comfort of knowing someone understood him completely, the way his chest had tightened when she'd cried, the panic he'd felt when she walked out. Maybe, he whispered. Maybe I have been for a while and I've just been too scared to admit it. Then what are you doing talking to me? Go after her. It's almost 11 at night. Since when has timing ever been your excuse for avoiding hard conversations? She had a point. James had avoided hard conversations his entire adult life. He'd let his marriage deteriorate rather than confront problems. He'd accepted a mediocre job out of college because negotiating felt too risky. He'd built a life around avoiding vulnerability. What if I'm wrong? He asked. What if I think I love her but I'm just comfortable with her? What if I ruin everything by trying and it doesn't work? What if it does work? His sister countered. What if you've been building toward this relationship for 3 years and you're just too stubborn to see it? What if the safe choice is actually choosing her instead of running away? That doesn't make sense. Relationships aren't safe. No. But love is. Real love. The kind that's built on friendship and mutual respect and genuine partnership. That's the safest foundation there is. Safer than isolation. Safer than pretending you don't need anyone. James closed his eyes. I don't know how to do this. You figure it out. You're an analyst, James. Analyze this like you would any other important decision. What does the data tell you? After they hung up, James sat in the empty conference room and did exactly that. He approached the question like a project at work, laying out evidence and drawing conclusions. Data point 1. He thought about Olivia constantly, not just about work, but about her well-being, her happiness, her life outside the office. Data point 2. No woman he'd dated in 3 years had measured up to her. He'd compared every single one to Olivia and found them lacking. Data point 3. His daughter, who was deeply attached to him and cautious about new people, had welcomed Olivia into their lives without hesitation. Data point 4. The thought of Olivia not being in his life caused genuine panic. Data point 5. When she'd confessed her feelings, his first instinct hadn't been rejection. It had been fear of losing her. Data point 6. He'd been jealous when she dated Marcus. Not protectively concerned, jealous. Data point 7. He made jokes about marrying her repeatedly for 3 years. That wasn't normal friend behavior. The data was overwhelming. The conclusion was obvious. He was in love with Olivia Bennett. He'd been in love with her for longer than he wanted to admit, and he'd been too terrified of vulnerability to acknowledge it. James looked around the conference room at their abandoned presentation. Tomorrow they were supposed to finish it with fresh eyes. But how could they work together now? How could they sit side by side and pretend this conversation hadn't happened? They couldn't. Something had fundamentally changed. The only question was whether that change would destroy them or transform them into something better. James gathered his things and turned off the conference room lights. The office was completely dark now. Everyone else gone home to their lives, their families, their relationships. He'd been so focused on being a good father that he'd forgotten he was allowed to want things for himself. But Emma deserved a father who modeled emotional courage, not fear. She deserved to see him take chances on happiness instead of always playing it safe. In the parking garage, he sat in his car and pulled out his phone. He typed a message to Olivia and deleted it, typed another, and deleted that too. Words felt inadequate for what he needed to say. Finally, he settled on something simple. Can we talk tomorrow? Not about the presentation, about us. He hit send before he could overthink it. 3 minutes later, his phone buzzed. Okay, my apartment, 9 a.m. I'll text you the address. James drove home through empty streets, his mind racing. He needed to figure out what to say. How to explain 3 years of denial and self-protection. How to tell her that he'd been in love with her without realizing it. How to ask for a chance to prove he could be brave enough to deserve her. At home, Emma's babysitter was watching television in the living room. She looked up when James entered. How was she? He asked quietly. Perfect, as always. She tried to negotiate staying up an extra hour to finish her book, but I held firm at 8:30. James smiled. She's getting good at negotiation. Wonder where she learned that. The babysitter grabbed her bag. You look exhausted. Rough night? You have no idea. After she left, James checked on Emma. She was asleep, her stuffed rabbit clutched in one arm, a chapter book lying open on her nightstand. She'd made it to page 47 before sleep claimed her. He adjusted her blanket and kissed her forehead gently, careful not to wake her. She stirred slightly, but didn't open her eyes. Love you, sweetheart, he whispered. What would Emma think about him dating Olivia? Would she be excited, confused? Would it change their dynamic in ways that might hurt her if things didn't work out? But then again, Emma already loved Olivia. She asked about her constantly. She drew pictures for her. She saved stories to tell her. Maybe this wouldn't be as complicated as he feared. Maybe Emma would just be happy that 2 of her favorite people were finally figuring out what she'd probably seen all along. James went to his own room and lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible. His mind kept replaying Olivia's words. I thought you'd never ask. The hope and pain mixed together in that single sentence devastated him. 2 years she'd carried these feelings. 2 years of watching him date other women and hide behind the safety of friendship. How many nights had she gone home and cried? How many times had his jokes about marriage felt like cruelty instead of humor? How much courage had it taken to finally confess? And he'd responded with fear. James grabbed his phone and opened their message history again. He scrolled back 2 years looking for signs he'd missed. There. A message from 18 months ago. Really happy you had fun on your date tonight. She seems nice. He'd responded, she was fine, but something was missing. I think I'm just bad at this dating thing. Her reply, you're not bad at it. You just haven't found the right person yet. Had she been hoping he'd say she was the right person? Had she been waiting for him to have that realization? Another message from a year ago. Emma asked me today if I have a boyfriend. When I said no, she asked why not. I told her I'm waiting for someone special. She said you're special and suggested I date you. Kids say the funniest things. His response, ha, Emma's got jokes. You could do way better than me. Her reply, I really couldn't. The signs had been there. He'd been too blind to see them. James read through message after message, each one now colored with new context. Every time she'd stayed late to help him, every time she'd checked on Emma, every time she'd been there when he needed her. It wasn't just friendship. It was love expressed through 1,000 small actions because she couldn't say the words. Around 2 a.m, James finally fell into restless sleep, his dreams confused and anxious. He woke at 6 feeling like he hadn't slept at all. Emma was already awake, humming to herself in her room. Morning, Dad, she said cheerfully when he appeared in her doorway. Can we have pancakes? Sure, sweetheart. They made breakfast together, Emma chattering about school and her friends and a project she was working on. James tried to focus, tried to be present, but his mind kept drifting to 9 o'clock and the conversation waiting for him. You're quiet today, Emma observed, drowning her pancakes in syrup. Just tired. You're always tired on Fridays. She took a bite and chewed thoughtfully. Is Miss Olivia coming over this weekend? James's heart squeezed. I don't know, Em. Maybe. I hope so. I want to show her my art project from school. I'm sure she'd love to see it. Emma grinned, revealing a gap where she'd recently lost a tooth. Miss Olivia is the best. I wish she lived with us. Why's that? Because then we'd be a real family, like Sophia's family. She has a mom and a dad, and they all live together. James set down his fork carefully. Emma, we are a real family. Families come in all different shapes, remember? I know, but don't you get lonely sometimes? When I'm asleep and you're all alone? The question, asked with such innocent concern, nearly broke him. Sometimes, he admitted, but I have you. That's what matters most. You could have Miss Olivia, too. She makes you smile more. Out of the mouths of children. After breakfast, James called his sister to watch Emma. He explained he had an important meeting and needed a few hours. She agreed immediately, clearly knowing this had nothing to do with work. Be honest with her, she said, and be honest with yourself. That's all you need to do. At 8:45, James stood outside Olivia's apartment building, his heart pounding. He'd rehearsed what to say 100 times in his head, but every version felt inadequate. The truth was simple. He loved her. He'd been too scared to admit it, and he was ready to stop being scared. Whether that would be enough, he didn't know. But he was finally ready to find out. He pressed the buzzer for apartment 4C, and Olivia's voice came through the intercom almost immediately, tight with tension. Come up. The lobby was clean but modest, the kind of building that catered to young professionals who spent more time at work than at home. James took the elevator to the 4th floor, his palms sweating, his prepared speech evaporating from his mind with each passing second. Olivia's door was slightly ajar when he arrived. He knocked anyway. It's open, she called. James pushed the door open and stepped into her apartment for the first time. He'd never been here before, he realized with a start. 3 years of friendship, and he'd never once seen where she lived. They'd always met at the office, at coffee shops, at restaurants, never in each other's personal spaces. The apartment was small but carefully decorated. Bookshelves lined one wall filled with novels and business books in equal measure. A desk by the window held her laptop and neatly organized files. Framed photographs dotted the surfaces. Her family, he assumed, people he'd heard about but never met. The space was unmistakably Olivia, organized, warm, thoughtful. She stood in the kitchen area making coffee. She'd changed from last night's work clothes into jeans and a soft gray sweater. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders instead of pulled back in its usual ponytail. She looked younger like this, vulnerable in a way he rarely saw. Coffee? She asked, not looking at him. Please. She poured 2 cups with practiced efficiency, preparing his exactly the way he liked it without asking. The gesture, so familiar and automatic, made his chest ache. She handed him the mug and finally met his eyes. Hers were red-rimmed like she'd been crying or hadn't slept. Probably both. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." They stood awkwardly in her small kitchen, 2 people who usually moved around each other with effortless synchronization suddenly unable to find their rhythm. "Should we sit?" Olivia gestured to her living room. They settled on opposite ends of her couch, the distance between them feeling symbolic. James wrapped his hands around his coffee mug, using the warmth to ground himself. "I didn't sleep last night," he said. "Neither did I. I kept replaying everything you said, and everything I said, and everything I should have said but didn't." Olivia waited, her expression carefully neutral. She'd laid herself bare last night. Now it was his turn. "I talked to my sister," James continued. "She told me I've been in love with you for years and I've just been too scared to admit it." Olivia's breath caught, but she didn't interrupt. "And I spent hours analyzing our friendship like it was a work project, looking at data points and drawing conclusions." He laughed shakily. "Because that's what I do when I'm scared. I try to make everything logical and rational." "What did you conclude?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. James set down his coffee and turned to face her fully. "That every woman I've dated in 3 years has failed to measure up to you. That I've been jealous every time you've shown interest in someone else. That I make jokes about marrying you because some part of me wants it to be true. That the thought of losing you is more terrifying than anything I've ever experienced." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes again, but she blinked them back. "James? I'm not finished." He took a shaky breath. "I've been protecting myself since my divorce, building walls and calling it stability, keeping you at a safe distance and calling it friendship. But the truth is, you've been inside those walls for a long time. You're already part of my life in every way that matters. You already fit into Emma's world and mine like you were always meant to be there. Then why are you still scared?" The question was gentle, but it demanded honesty. "Because loving someone means giving them the power to destroy you," James said simply. "My ex-wife had that power and she used it. She lied, she cheated, she tried to take Emma away from me. It nearly broke me, Olivia, and the idea of going through that again." "I'm not her," Olivia said firmly. "I know you're not, my head knows that, but my fear doesn't listen to logic." Olivia shifted slightly closer, closing some of the distance between them. "What are you saying, James? Because I need clarity right now. I can't handle ambiguity." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman who'd been his constant for 3 years. The person who knew his coffee order and his daughter's favorite bedtime story, who covered for him in meetings and walked beside him through every professional challenge, who'd loved him silently while he'd been too blind to see it. "I'm saying I've been in love with you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Maybe not for as long as you've loved me, but definitely for longer than I've been willing to admit. I'm saying that when I picture my future, you're in it. Not as my colleague or my friend, but as my partner, in everything." A sob escaped Olivia's throat. "You mean that?" "Every word. But I'm also saying I'm terrified. I'm a mess, Olivia. I'm a single father with trust issues and a fear of vulnerability. I work too much and I forget important things, and I'm not good at expressing emotions. I'm not sure I know how to be what you need." "You've been what I need for 3 years," she said, tears streaming down her face now. "You just didn't know it." James moved closer, reaching for her hand. She let him take it, her fingers trembling in his. "I need you to understand something," he said seriously. "If we do this, if we try to turn this friendship into something more, Emma comes first, always. That's non-negotiable. I would never ask you to choose between us. I love Emma. You know I do. I do know. But if this doesn't work out, if we try and fail, she'll be caught in the fallout. That terrifies me more than anything else." Olivia squeezed his hand. "Then we don't fail. We don't treat this like an experiment or a risk we're taking. We treat it like what it is. A relationship we've been building for 3 years that we're finally acknowledging. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is simple. Maybe we're the ones making it complicated." She brushed at her tears with her free hand. I've loved you through bad haircuts and terrible presentations and every awkward dad joke you've ever made. I've loved you when you were stressed and snappy and when you forgot our meetings. I've loved you at your most exhausted and your most frustrated. So whatever mess you think you are, I've already seen it, and I'm still here. The words settled over James like a balm. What did I do to deserve you? You were yourself. You were kind and genuine, and you made me feel seen in a way no one else ever has. Olivia smiled through her tears. And you make terrible jokes that somehow still make me laugh. James laughed weakly. My humor is an acquired taste. I acquired it years ago. They sat in silence for a moment, hands intertwined, processing the weight of what they were acknowledging. 3 years of friendship was transforming into something else, something both terrifying and inevitable. I don't know how to do this, James admitted. I haven't been in a real relationship since my marriage. I don't know the rules anymore. We make our own rules, Olivia said. We go slow, we communicate, we prioritize Emma, and we remember that we were best friends first. That foundation isn't going anywhere. What about work? The office gossip is going to be insufferable. Let them talk. We've been the subject of gossip for 3 years anyway. At least now it'll be accurate. She paused. Though we'll need to notify HR. There are policies about workplace relationships. Leave it to Olivia to think about corporate compliance, even during an emotional conversation. James felt a rush of affection so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. You're remarkable, he said quietly. I'm practical. You're both. Olivia shifted closer until they were sitting side by side instead of at opposite ends of the couch. Can I ask you something? Anything. When did you know? When did you realize you had feelings for me? James thought about it carefully. I think part of me has known for a long time, but I wouldn't let myself examine it. But last night, when you walked out of that conference room and I thought I might have lost you, that's when I couldn't deny it anymore. The fear of losing you was sharper than any fear of risk. I knew when you brought Emma to the office that first time, Olivia said softly. The way you were with her, so patient and gentle. The way you'd built your whole life around making sure she was okay. I'd never seen a man be a father like that. And then she asked me about Mr. Floppity, and you looked so relieved that I was good with her, and I fell. That was 2.5 years ago. I know, I've been hiding this for a long time, James. The weight of that sacrifice hit him hard. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I made jokes that hurt you. I'm sorry I talked about other women and made you feel invisible. You didn't know. You were protecting yourself, I understand that. It doesn't make it okay. No, Olivia agreed, but we're here now. That's what matters. James lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture feeling both natural and monumentally significant. Olivia's breath hitched. I want to do this right, he said. I want to take you on actual dates. I want to court you properly, not just transition from friendship to relationship without any romance. We've been on dozens of dates, Olivia pointed out, a smile playing at her lips. We just called them late nights at work. Those don't count. I want to take you to dinner, to movies, to places that have nothing to do with Morrison and Associates or project deadlines. I'd like that. And I want to tell Emma, together, so she understands what this means. Olivia's expression turned serious. What if she doesn't react well? She will. She asks about you constantly. Last night at breakfast, she said she wishes you lived with us so we'd be a real family. James shook his head at the memory. Apparently she's been planning this for a while. She's a smart kid. Too smart. She saw this before I did. They sat together in comfortable silence, the morning light streaming through Olivia's windows, the weight of last night's confession slowly transforming into something that felt like hope. We still have to finish that presentation, Olivia said eventually. James groaned. I'd completely forgotten about it. We have until Monday morning. That gives us the rest of today and tomorrow to get it done. Can we work on it together, or is that too weird now? Olivia laughed, that genuine sound he loved. James, we've been working together for 3 years. A relationship isn't going to change that. If anything, it might make us more efficient. How do you figure? Because now I don't have to hide the fact that I think you're brilliant. I can just say it. The compliment made him blush. I'm not brilliant. I'm competent at spreadsheets. You're brilliant, Olivia insisted. You see patterns no one else catches. You explain complex data in ways clients can actually understand. You make everyone around you better at their jobs just by being thorough and thoughtful. Stop, you're going to give me an ego. Impossible, you're too self-deprecating for that. She squeezed his hand. But I'm serious, James. You don't give yourself enough credit. For your work, for your parenting, for any of it. I give myself appropriate credit based on objective assessment. See, that right there. You can't even accept a compliment without turning it into an analysis. But she was smiling as she said it. James pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, fitting against his side like she was made to be there. This feels right, he murmured. It does. I'm still scared. Me too, but I think that's normal. Anything worth having is scary. They stayed like that for a while, finding comfort in physical closeness they'd always denied themselves. Eventually, practical concerns intruded. I need to get back to Emma, James said reluctantly. My sister is watching her, but I don't want to take advantage. When can I see you again? Really see you, not just at work. Tonight. I could get a babysitter. We could have dinner. Olivia pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright. Like a real date? Like a real date. I'd love that. James stood, pulling her up with him. They walked to her door slowly, neither wanting to separate. What happens Monday at work? Olivia asked. Do we tell people? We tell HR first, per policy, then we tell our close colleagues. After that, it's nobody's business but ours. Derek is going to be insufferable. Derek has been insufferable about us for 3 years. At least now we can confirm his suspicions, and he'll hopefully shut up about it. Olivia laughed. Somehow, I doubt that. At her door, James turned to face her. They stood close, closer than they'd ever stood as just friends. His heart was pounding again, but this time it wasn't from fear. Can I kiss you? He asked quietly. Olivia's eyes widened slightly. Yes. He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheek. She looked up at him with an expression of such trust and love that it made his throat tight. He'd spent 3 years not noticing that look, too caught up in his own protective walls to see what was right in front of him. He wasn't going to waste any more time. James leaned down and kissed her softly, tentatively, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. It was nothing like the dramatic first kisses in movies. There were no fireworks, no soundtrack, no perfect lighting. It was just two people who'd known each other for years, finally allowing themselves to acknowledge what had been building all along. When they pulled apart, Olivia was smiling through fresh tears. That was worth the wait, she whispered. We've wasted so much time. We haven't wasted anything. We built a foundation. Everything that comes next will be stronger because of it. James kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then her lips again. He couldn't seem to stop touching her now that he'd allowed himself to start. I need to go, he said reluctantly. I know, tonight? Tonight. I'll text you the restaurant. Dress code? Whatever you want. You could show up in a garbage bag and I'd still think you were beautiful. Olivia laughed. That's the least romantic compliment I've ever received. I'm out of practice. Give me time. You have all the time you need. James left her apartment feeling lighter than he had in years. The fear was still there, humming under his skin, but it was manageable now, controllable, and the hope rising alongside it was stronger. His sister was waiting at his apartment with Emma, who was coloring at the kitchen table. Dad! Emma jumped up when he entered. Aunt Rachel made pancakes again. We had pancakes twice in one day. Lucky girl, James said, kissing the top of her head. His sister caught his eye over Emma's head, raising her eyebrows in question. He nodded slightly, and her face broke into a huge grin. Em, why don't you go play in your room for a few minutes? Rachel suggested. I need to talk to your dad about grown-up stuff. Emma groaned dramatically, but complied, taking her coloring book with her. As soon as her door closed, Rachel grabbed James's arm. Tell me everything. I told her I love her. And she loves me too. We're going to try this, carefully, with Emma's well-being as the priority. But we're going to try. Rachel hugged him tightly. I'm so happy for you. You deserve this, James. You deserve to be happy. I'm terrified I'll screw it up. You won't. And even if you stumble, Olivia will be there. That's what partnership means. They talked for another 20 minutes, Rachel offering advice and enthusiasm in equal measure. When she finally left, James sat down with Emma. "Can we talk about something important?" he asked. Emma set down her crayons, her expression serious. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart, nothing like that. I want to talk to you about Miss Olivia." Emma perked up immediately. "Is she coming over?" "Not right now, but soon. The thing is, Miss Olivia and I are going to start spending more time together, going out to dinner, doing fun things, like how some of your friends' parents do." Emma tilted her head, processing this information. "You mean like a boyfriend and girlfriend?" "Exactly like that." "How would you feel about that?" "Will she still be my friend too?" "Absolutely. Nothing about your relationship with her changes. She'll still want to see your art projects and hear about school." Emma considered this for a moment, then broke into a smile. "Good, because I love Miss Olivia. And you love her too, right?" "Yes, I do." "Then that's okay. When is she coming over?" James laughed at his daughter's easy acceptance. "Maybe this weekend. Would you like that?" "Can we make cookies?" "We can definitely make cookies." Emma went back to her coloring, the conversation apparently settled in her mind. James marveled at her resilience, her ability to adapt to changes that would have sent him into a spiral of anxiety. The rest of the day passed in a blur of nervous energy. James cleaned the apartment, an anxious habit he couldn't quite shake. He confirmed the dinner reservation. He texted Olivia updates about Emma's enthusiastic response, which made her send back a string of heart emojis that made him smile like an idiot. At 6 o'clock, after Emma was settled with a babysitter and a Disney movie, James drove to the restaurant he'd chosen, a quiet Italian place known for excellent pasta and intimate ambiance. Olivia was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table. She'd changed into a dark blue dress that brought out her eyes, and her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. James's breath caught when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. She blushed. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." "I tried. Emma supervised my outfit choice. Apparently, my first 3 options were too boring." "I love that she's invested in this. She asked when you're coming over to make cookies." Olivia laughed. "I'd love to. This weekend? Perfect." Their waiter appeared with menus and wine recommendations. They ordered, falling into easy conversation that felt exactly like their usual dynamic, but with an added layer of intimacy. James could reach across the table and hold her hand now. He could compliment her without couching it in casual friendship. He could look at her openly, without pretending he wasn't. "This is surreal," Olivia said at one point. "A week ago, I was convinced this would never happen, that I'd spend the rest of my life loving you from a distance. I'm sorry it took me so long to figure it out. Stop apologizing. We're here now. That's what matters." Their food arrived and they ate while discussing the presentation they still needed to finish, upcoming projects at work, Emma's school activities, and a dozen other topics that wove their lives together. "What do we tell people?" James asked. "When they ask how we got together?" "The truth. That we were friends for 3 years and finally realized we were in love." "They're going to say they knew all along." "Let them. They're probably right." After dinner, James walked Olivia to her car, their fingers intertwined. The parking lot was quiet, lit by street lamps that cast everything in golden light. "Thank you for taking a chance on me," James said quietly, "for being patient while I figured myself out." "Thank you for being brave enough to try," Olivia replied. "I know how hard this is for you. It gets easier every minute I'm with you." She kissed him then, standing on her toes in the parking lot like they were teenagers instead of professionals in their 30s. James wrapped his arms around her and kissed her back, no longer afraid of what this meant. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and smiling, James rested his forehead against hers. "I should get back to Emma," he said reluctantly. "I know. Text me when you get home." "Promise." He watched her drive away, feeling the absence of her presence like a physical thing, but it was a good absence, one softened by the knowledge that he'd see her again tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days that followed. At home, Emma was asleep on the couch. James paid the babysitter and carried his daughter to bed, tucking her in carefully. "Did you have fun with Miss Olivia?" Emma mumbled, half asleep. "I did, sweetheart." "Good. You smile more when she's around." out of the mouths of children. James returned to the living room and pulled out his laptop, intending to work on the presentation. Instead, he found himself pulling up photos from the past 3 years. Office parties where he and Olivia stood side by side. Team building events where they'd partnered automatically. Company picnics where Olivia had played with Emma while James handled the grill. The evidence had always been there. He just hadn't been ready to see it. His phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. "Made it home safe. Already missing you. Is that normal after one official date?" He typed back, "If it's not normal, I don't care. I'm missing you too." Another message. "Tomorrow we tackle that presentation, together." Together, he confirmed, like everything else from now on. Saturday morning arrived with Emma bouncing on James's bed at 7 a.m., her usual weekend wake-up call. Dad, is Miss Olivia coming today? You said maybe this weekend, and it's the weekend now." James groaned and checked his phone. A message from Olivia had come through 20 minutes earlier. "Still on for cookies today? Emma's probably already awake and asking about me." He smiled and typed back, "She's currently using my ribs as a trampoline. Come over whenever you're ready. Give me an hour to make myself presentable." "You're always presentable." Flatterer. Emma was vibrating with excitement as they made breakfast, asking approximately 60 questions about what kind of cookies they'd make and whether Miss Olivia liked chocolate chips or peanut butter better. "We'll ask her when she gets here," James said for the third time. "But I need to know now so I can prepare mentally." James choked on his coffee. "Who taught you to say prepare mentally?" "You. You say it all the time before work meetings." Apparently he needed to watch what he said around his observant daughter. When the doorbell rang at 9, Emma sprinted to answer it before James could even stand up. "Miss Olivia!" Emma threw herself at Olivia, who laughed and caught her in a hug. "Hey, kiddo, I heard we're making cookies today." "So many cookies. Dad bought 3 kinds of chips, and we have sprinkles and everything." Olivia met James's eyes over Emma's head, her expression warm and slightly amused. He felt his chest tighten in the best way. "Your dad is very prepared." "He's always prepared, sometimes too prepared. Last week he packed 3 extra lunches in case I got hungry." "That was one time," James protested. "And you did eat 2 of them." Emma dragged Olivia into the kitchen, already pulling out mixing bowls and ingredients with an efficiency that suggested she'd been planning this for days. James hung back, watching them interact with a feeling he couldn't quite name. Joy, maybe. Or relief. Or just rightness. "Your dad says you two are boyfriend-girlfriend now," Emma announced, dumping flour into a bowl with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Olivia glanced at James, who nodded encouragement. "That's right. How do you feel about that?" Emma considered this while measuring chocolate chips directly into her mouth. "It's good. You make him happy. And you're already like family anyway." "I love you too, Em," Olivia said softly. "I know. Can we make the cookies now?" They spent the next hour creating what could generously be called organized chaos. Flour ended up everywhere despite James's attempts at containment. Emma insisted on adding just a little more chocolate chips until the dough was more chips than cookie. Olivia documented the disaster with photos on her phone, laughing as Emma posed with flour on her nose. "This is going in the family album," Olivia declared. Emma beamed. "We're making a family album. Every family should have one." The casual way Olivia included herself in their family unit made James's throat tight. He'd spent 3 years keeping her at arm's length, and she'd been waiting patiently to belong. While the cookies baked, filling the apartment with the smell of chocolate and vanilla, Emma convinced Olivia to play her favorite board game. James watched them from the kitchen, pretending to clean while actually just observing the 2 most important people in his life interact with such natural ease. "Dad, you have to play too," Emma called. "We need 3 players." He joined them on the living room floor, and they played 2 rounds while cookies cooled on the counter. Emma won both times with suspicious luck, and James suspected Olivia was letting her win. "You're not supposed to let kids win," he murmured to Olivia when Emma went to check the cookies. "It gives them unrealistic expectations." "She's 6. She can have unrealistic expectations for a few more years." "You're going to spoil her." "That's my job now, isn't it? You're the disciplinarian, I'm the fun one." "We're going to need to establish consistent parenting strategies." Olivia raised an eyebrow. Parenting strategies? We've been officially dating for 36 hours, James flushed. I'm getting ahead of myself. No. Olivia's expression softened. You're thinking about the future. That's different, and I like that you're including me in it. Emma returned with a cookie in each hand. These are really good. We should make them every weekend. Every weekend might be excessive, James said. Every other weekend? Emma negotiated. We'll see. They ate warm cookies and cold milk while Emma chattered about school and her friends and a butterfly she'd seen in the playground. Olivia listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions and laughing at Emma's dramatic retellings. This was what James had been afraid of losing. Not just Olivia's presence in his life, but this specific dynamic, the three of them together, comfortable and happy. He'd been so convinced that romance would complicate everything that he'd almost refused to try. But watching Emma lean against Olivia while explaining the intricate social politics of first grade, he realized his fear had been backwards. Romance wasn't the complication. Pretending they were only friends had been the complication. After lunch, Emma requested a movie. She picked an animated film she'd seen a dozen times and settled between James and Olivia on the couch. Within 20 minutes, she was asleep, her head on Olivia's lap. She always does this, James whispered. Insists on a movie, then crashes immediately. It's adorable. Olivia gently stroked Emma's hair. She's such a great kid, James. You've done an amazing job with her. I've made a lot of mistakes. Every parent makes mistakes, but she's kind and smart and confident. That doesn't happen by accident. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the movie neither was really paying attention to. James reached over and took Olivia's free hand, intertwining their fingers. Thank you for being so good with her, he said quietly. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just being myself. That's what makes it special. When the movie ended, Emma stirred but didn't fully wake. James carefully carried her to her room for a nap, tucking her in with Mr. Floppity. In the living room, Olivia was cleaning up cookie crumbs and putting away the board game. You don't have to do that, James said. I know, but I want to. She smiled at him. Is this weird? Being here in your space, doing domestic things? It's the opposite of weird. It feels right. He moved closer, wrapping his arms around her waist. You fit here. I've always wanted to fit here. She looped her arms around his neck. I used to imagine what it would be like, being part of your and Emma's daily life. Not just visits and special occasions, but regular boring Saturdays. This is a pretty great Saturday. The best. She kissed him softly. We should probably work on that presentation, though. It's not going to finish itself. You're very committed to corporate success. Someone has to be. You'd forget about the deadline entirely if I didn't remind you. They sat up at James's dining table with their laptops, falling into their familiar work rhythm. But now James could lean over and kiss her cheek when she made a particularly good point. She could rest her hand on his shoulder while reviewing his financial projections. Small touches that had been forbidden territory were now not just allowed, but welcomed. This section needs stronger data, Olivia said, pointing at his screen. I have the numbers. I just need to format them better. Let me see. She pulled his laptop closer, her fingers flying over the keys as she reorganized his spreadsheet into something more visually compelling. There. Now, the trend is clearer. James watched her work, marveling at how she could take his raw analysis and transform it into something presentation-worthy. They complemented each other perfectly, his technical skills and her communication abilities combining into something stronger than either could achieve alone. We make a good team, he said. We always have. She looked up at him with a soft smile. That was never in question. They worked through the afternoon, taking breaks to check on Emma and refuel with leftover cookies. By 5 o'clock, the presentation was nearly complete. We should run through it one more time tomorrow, Olivia suggested. Fresh eyes before Monday morning. Want to come over again? I can make dinner. You're going to spoil me with all this domesticity. That's the plan. Olivia left around 6, after saying goodbye to a newly awakened Emma, who extracted a promise that she'd come back tomorrow. James made dinner while Emma drew pictures at the kitchen table, mostly drawings of the three of them together, he noticed. Do you like Miss Olivia being here more? Emma asked while they ate. I do. Do you? Yeah. The apartment feels less empty when she's here. Emma pushed her peas around her plate. Do you think she'll live with us someday? James carefully considered his answer. Maybe, but that's something that would happen way in the future, after we've been dating for a long time. How long is a long time? At least a year, maybe longer. That's forever, Emma protested. It's really not. And these things take time, sweetheart. We want to make sure we're doing everything right. Emma seemed to accept this, returning her attention to her dinner. But later, when James was tucking her in, she brought it up again. I hope Miss Olivia does move in eventually, she said sleepily. She makes you smile the way you used to before Mommy left. The observation hit James squarely in the chest. He'd thought he'd hidden his sadness well, had convinced himself Emma was too young to remember the darkness that had followed his divorce. Apparently, children noticed everything. I'm sorry if I've been sad, he said, smoothing her hair back. You're not sad now, Emma said. That's good. After she fell asleep, James sat in his living room and let himself feel the full weight of what was happening. For 3 years, he'd been in survival mode, work, parenting, maintaining basic functionality. Happiness had seemed like a luxury he couldn't afford. But Olivia made him happy, not in a temporary, distracted way, but in a deep, fundamental way that made him feel like himself again. His phone buzzed. Olivia. Made it home. Emma is amazing. You're amazing. Today was perfect. He replied, Come back tomorrow? Try to stop me. Sunday followed the same pattern as Saturday, with one significant addition. James invited his sister over for dinner, wanting to officially introduce her to this new version of his relationship with Olivia. Rachel arrived with wine and knowing looks, immediately hugging Olivia like they were old friends. I've heard so much about you, Rachel said. Well, I've been hearing about you for 3 years, but now I can be more direct about how perfect you are for my brother. Rachel, James warned. What? I'm being friendly. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Emma monopolized Olivia's attention, showing her every toy and book and piece of art she'd created in the past month. Rachel interrogated Olivia with questions disguised as casual conversation. James tried to maintain some semblance of control and mostly failed. Your family is wonderful, Olivia said later, while they finished the presentation in James's home office. They're overwhelming. They're loving. There's a difference. She saved the final slide and closed her laptop. There. Ready for tomorrow. Ready to face the office gossip? I've been ready for 3 years. This is just making it official. Monday morning arrived with the familiar anxiety of a major presentation, multiplied by the new dynamic between them. They'd agreed to talk to HR first thing before the presentation. The conversation with HR was surprisingly straightforward. They filled out disclosure forms, confirmed they'd maintain professional boundaries at work, and promised to notify management if any conflicts of interest arose. You're not the first workplace couple, the HR representative said. Just keep it professional during business hours, and there shouldn't be any issues. Their presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. James and Olivia spent the hour before reviewing their slides one final time, testing the technology and preparing for potential client questions. Nervous? Olivia asked as they waited in the conference room for their manager and the client to arrive. About the presentation? No. We did good work. About people knowing about us? A little, but mostly I'm just relieved we don't have to hide anymore. The presentation went flawlessly. Their client asked thoughtful questions. Their manager looked impressed. By the time they finished, James could tell from the client's body language that they were ready to sign. Excellent work, both of you, their manager said afterward. This is exactly the kind of partnership that makes our company successful. If he noticed anything different between them, he didn't comment on it, but Derek cornered them in the break room before lunch. So, he said, grinning widely, I heard you two filed relationship disclosure forms. News travels fast, Olivia said dryly. I've been saying for 3 years that you were perfect for each other. Do I get credit for being right? You get credit for being annoying, James replied, but without heat. Seriously, though, I'm happy for you guys. It's about time. Other colleagues offered similar sentiments throughout the day, some genuine, some accompanied by barely concealed I told you so expressions. James handled it with more grace than he'd expected, partly because Olivia was beside him, making it all feel manageable. By Wednesday, the initial excitement had died down, and they settled into a new normal. Work remained work, but now James could meet Olivia for lunch without overthinking it. They could leave together at the end of the day without awkward explanations. The change was subtle but significant. James felt lighter, less guarded, more willing to engage with colleagues instead of just surviving until he could leave. "You seem different," his manager commented during their weekly one-on-one. "More engaged." "I'm happy," James said simply. "For the first time in a long time, I'm genuinely happy." "It shows. Keep it up." Friday evening, Olivia came over for dinner again. It was becoming a routine, weeknight dinners at James's place, where they could spend time together with Emma before her bedtime. "Miss Olivia, watch this!" Emma performed an elaborate dance she'd learned in gym class, complete with spins and jumps. "That's amazing!" Olivia clapped enthusiastically. "You're so coordinated." "Dad's not. He tripped over his own feet yesterday." "I was carrying groceries and couldn't see the step," James protested. "Still counts as tripping over your feet." After Emma went to bed, James and Olivia curled up on the couch together. This was his favorite part of the evening. The quiet after Emma was asleep, when they could just be together without the performance of parenting or the pressure of work. "I've been thinking," Olivia said, playing with his fingers absently. "About what?" "How fast this has all moved. We've only been officially together for a week, but it feels like we've been doing this forever." "Is that bad?" "No, it's just interesting. Most couples have to learn about each other gradually. We skipped that entire phase. We had 3 years of learning about each other. We just weren't calling it dating." "True." She shifted to look at him directly. "Do you have any regrets about how this happened?" James thought about it honestly. "I regret not seeing it sooner. I regret making you wait while I figured myself out. But the way it happened, Thursday night in that conference room, I don't think I would have been ready any earlier. I needed to be scared of losing you to realize what you meant to me." "That's very analytical." "I'm an analytical person. You knew that when you fell in love with me." Olivia laughed. "I did. It's part of your charm." "I have charm?" "Surprisingly, yes. Buried under layers of spreadsheets and risk aversion, but it's there." He kissed her to stop her from elaborating on his supposed charm. She kissed him back, and they stayed like that for a while, learning the contours of this new aspect of their relationship. "I should go," Olivia said eventually, reluctantly. "It's getting late." "Stay." The word came out before James could think about it. "I mean, you could stay, if you want. The couch pulls out. Or you could take my bed and I'll take the couch. Or—" "James, breathe." He took a breath. "Are you sure?" she asked. "We've only been dating a week. We've known each other 3 years, and it's late, and I don't like the idea of you driving across town when you're tired." "Just sleeping?" "Just sleeping. I'm not trying to pressure you into anything. I like having you here in my space, being part of this." He gestured vaguely at the apartment. Olivia smiled. "Okay, but I'm taking the guest room. We're not explaining to Emma why I'm in your bed at this stage of the relationship." "Fair point." They got ready for bed with an intimacy that felt both new and familiar. Olivia borrowed one of James's t-shirts, which hung to her knees and made her look younger somehow. He showed her where everything was in the bathroom, provided a spare toothbrush, made sure she had enough pillows. "You're fussing," she observed. "I want you to be comfortable." "I'm always comfortable with you." James kissed her goodnight outside the guest room, a gentle press of lips that held promise without pressure. Then he went to his own room and lay in bed, marveling at the fact that Olivia was sleeping 20 feet away. His phone buzzed. A message from her. "Thank you for asking me to stay. This feels right." He typed back, "Everything feels right with you." "Getting sappy on me, Walker?" "Maybe." "Bennett, are you going to make fun of me for having feelings?" "Never. I've been waiting 3 years for you to have feelings. I'm going to savor every sappy moment." "Good night, Olivia." "Good night, James. Sweet dreams." He fell asleep, smiling, the knowledge that she was close by, settling over him like a comfort. Saturday morning, Emma discovered Olivia at the breakfast table and reacted like it was the best surprise of her life. "You stayed over!" Emma bounced excitedly. "Are you going to stay over every night now?" "Not every night," Olivia said, glancing at James for support. "But sometimes. Sometimes is good. Dad makes really good pancakes on Saturday mornings. He makes them shaped like animals." "I've seen pictures," Olivia said. "Very impressive." They spent the morning together, and James couldn't help but notice how natural it all felt. Olivia helping Emma get dressed, Emma showing Olivia her room and all her treasures, the three of them making breakfast together, working around each other in the small kitchen with practiced ease. This was what he'd been afraid of, this depth of integration, this level of vulnerability. But now that he was living it, the fear had transformed into something else entirely. Not absence of fear exactly, but courage to move forward despite it. "What are you thinking about?" Olivia asked, catching him staring. "How grateful I am that you were patient with me." "I wasn't that patient. I cried in a conference room and made you confront your feelings. Best conference room breakdown ever." Emma looked up from her pancakes. "What's a breakdown?" "Nothing bad," James assured her. "Miss Olivia just helped me realize something important." "That you love her?" "Exactly that." "I could have told you that ages ago," Emma said matter-of-factly. "You get all smiley when she texts you." Olivia laughed. "Your daughter is very observant. Too observant sometimes." They spent the day together as a unit, running errands and going to the park, and generally existing in each other's orbit. By the time Olivia left that evening, it felt less like a goodbye and more like a brief intermission. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked at the door. "You're welcome here any time, you know that, right? You don't have to wait for an invitation." "I know, but I also don't want to overstep. This is your and Emma's home. It could be your home too, eventually, when you're ready." Olivia's eyes widened slightly. "James, I'm not proposing we move in together tomorrow. I'm just saying that I can see that future, clearly, and I want you to know that." She kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I can see it too." After she left, James found Emma already in her pajamas, building an elaborate castle with her blocks. "Is Miss Olivia going to be here all the time now?" she asked. "Would that be okay with you?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "I like when she's here. You're happier. And she reads bedtime stories with different voices for all the characters." "She is pretty good at that." "Dad?" Emma looked up at him seriously. "Do you think Miss Olivia will stay forever?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Emma had already experienced one parent leaving. The fear of abandonment ran deep. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." "Me too." That night, after Emma was asleep, James sat at his desk and pulled up a document he'd started and abandoned dozens of times over the past 3 years. A list of goals and dreams for the future. For the first time, he added one that didn't center entirely on Emma or his career. Build a life with Olivia. It felt terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, but mostly it felt right. The weeks that followed established a rhythm that felt both entirely new and comfortably familiar. Olivia became a fixture in James and Emma's life, her presence woven so seamlessly into their routine that it was hard to remember a time when she hadn't been there. Monday mornings still meant coffee before work, but now James would arrive at Olivia's apartment to pick her up, and they'd drive to the office together. Emma's bedtime routine now often included Olivia reading stories with elaborate character voices that made Emma giggle uncontrollably. Weekend mornings meant pancakes and lazy hours where the three of them would simply exist together without agenda or pressure. But 3 months into their relationship, James noticed something shifting in Olivia. Small things at first, the way she'd grow quiet when they discussed future plans, the hesitation before she'd agree to stay over, the careful distance she'd maintain when certain topics came up. It came to a head on a Tuesday evening in late winter. They were at James's apartment, having just put Emma to bed after a particularly energetic evening of playing board games. Olivia had been unusually subdued all night, and James had tried to give her space, assuming she'd had a rough day at work. "Can we talk?" Olivia asked, settling on the couch with an expression that made James's stomach drop. Nothing good ever started with, "Can we talk?" "Of course." He sat beside her, trying to keep his voice calm despite the anxiety suddenly flooding his system. "What's going on?" Olivia twisted her hands together, a nervous habit he'd seen maybe twice in 3 years. I need to tell you something, and I don't know how you're going to react. You're scaring me. I'm scared too. She took a deep breath. I got a job offer. In Seattle. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. James felt his chest constrict. Seattle, he repeated, his voice flat. It's an incredible opportunity. Director of operations for a tech startup. Significant salary increase, equity, the whole package. She was talking fast now, like she needed to get it all out before he could interrupt. They headhunted me 3 weeks ago, and I've been going through their interview process, and they made the offer yesterday. 3 weeks. James tried to process this. You've known about this for 3 weeks and didn't tell me? I didn't want to worry you until I knew if it was even real. We're supposed to be partners, Olivia. Partners tell each other when major life decisions are on the table. I know, you're right. I should have told you sooner. She looked at him with tears already forming in her eyes. But I knew what telling you would mean. I knew we'd have to have this conversation. What conversation? The one where we figure out if what we have is strong enough to survive distance, or if, her voice cracked, or if this is where it ends. James stood abruptly, needing to move, to do something with the panic coursing through him. You're actually considering taking it? It's my career, James. It's everything I've been working toward. Your career is here. We just completed that major project together. Our manager has been hinting about promotions. You have a future at Morrison and Associates. A future as a senior analyst, maybe eventually a junior director if I wait another 5 years. This offer is director level now, with a startup that could change my entire trajectory. So our relationship, what we've built, it's worth less than a job title? Olivia's expression hardened slightly. That's not fair. None of this is fair. James ran his hand through his hair, that nervous gesture he couldn't suppress. We've been together 3 months, Olivia. 3 months of finally getting this right, and now you're talking about moving across the country? Which is why I'm talking to you about it instead of just accepting. I want to know what you think, what you want. I want you to stay. The words came out raw, honest. I want you here, with me and Emma. I want the future we've been building. But is that what's best for me? Olivia's voice was quiet, but firm. I've been thinking about this for weeks, James, analyzing it from every angle. If I turn this down, will I resent you for it? Will I spend the next 5 years wondering what could have been? The question hit him like a punch. You're already thinking about resenting me? I'm being honest about the risks. Isn't that what we promised each other? Complete honesty? James sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. I can't believe this is happening. They sat in painful silence for several minutes. James's mind was racing, trying to find solutions, trying to make the numbers work the way he did with spreadsheets at work. But this wasn't a data problem with a clean answer. What if we tried long distance? Olivia suggested tentatively. Seattle isn't impossibly far. We could visit on weekends. I have Emma. I can't just fly to Seattle every weekend, and I can't uproot her from her school, her friends, her stability. Not for a relationship that's only 3 months old. So we're back to this being about the job versus the relationship. No. James looked at her directly. We're back to the fact that you're making a unilateral decision that affects both of us, and you didn't include me in the process until it was almost too late to matter. That's not true. I'm including you now. After 3 weeks of interviews and negotiation, after you've already emotionally invested in the idea, you're not asking for my input, Olivia. You're asking for my permission to leave. The accusation hung between them, and Olivia's tears finally spilled over. I don't know what you want from me, she said, her voice breaking. I love you. I love Emma. I love the life we're building. But I also have ambitions beyond being someone's girlfriend, beyond being the fun person who shows up for weekend pancakes. That's not all you are to us. Isn't it? Be honest, James. What role do I actually play in your life? I'm not Emma's mother. I'm not your wife. I don't live here. I don't have legal rights or official standing. I'm just the woman you're dating. Just? The word felt like a slap. You're not just anything. You're essential. But not essential enough that you'd consider moving with me. The statement landed like a bomb. James stared at her, genuinely shocked. You want me to uproot Emma and move to Seattle? For a job you've had for all of 5 minutes? I'm not saying that. I'm just pointing out that you expect me to sacrifice my career for this relationship, but you wouldn't do the same. I have a daughter. My decisions aren't just about me. And I have a career. My decisions aren't just about us. They were talking in circles, both hurt and defensive, the conversation spiraling into territory neither had intended to explore. James felt like he was watching their relationship crumble in real time, and he had no idea how to stop it. Maybe we need some space, Olivia said finally, wiping at her tears, to think about what we actually want. Space, James laughed bitterly. That's code for breaking up. It's code for not making permanent decisions while we're both emotional and scared. I'm not scared. I'm angry. You spent 3 weeks lying to me by omission. I didn't lie. You kept something massive from me, something that directly impacts our future. How is that not a form of lying? Olivia stood, grabbing her jacket. I should go. Yeah, you should. The words came out harsher than James intended, fueled by hurt and fear. Clearly, you've already made your decision anyway. I haven't decided anything. Haven't you? You're interviewing across the country. You're negotiating offers. You're planning a future that doesn't include me. Sounds pretty decided to me. You know what, James? Olivia's voice rose slightly, her own anger finally breaking through. This is exactly why I didn't tell you sooner. Because I knew you'd make it about you being abandoned instead of about me having opportunities. The word abandoned hit James like she'd physically struck him. His divorce, his ex-wife leaving, the fear that had driven every careful decision for 3 years. Olivia had just thrown it all in his face. Get out, he said quietly. James? I said get out. If you want space, take all the space you need. Olivia grabbed her bag, tears streaming down her face. We're not done talking about this. Aren't we? You've made it pretty clear where your priorities are. She left without another word, the door closing behind her with a finality that echoed through the apartment. James stood in his living room, shaking with anger and hurt and fear, listening to the silence that Olivia's absence created. He'd been right all along. Vulnerability led to pain. Opening his heart had given someone the power to destroy him. And now she was leaving. James barely slept that night, his mind replaying the argument on an endless loop. Every harsh word, every accusation, every moment where he could have responded differently but hadn't. By morning, the anger had faded into something worse, a hollow ache that sat in his chest like a physical weight. Emma noticed immediately at breakfast. Where's Miss Olivia? Isn't it Wednesday? She usually comes over on Wednesdays. She's busy, sweetheart. Is she coming this weekend? I don't know. Emma's face fell. Did you have a fight? James looked at his daughter's worried expression and felt guilt compound his existing misery. We had a disagreement. Are you going to fix it? I'm not sure I can. But you have to. Emma's voice trembled. You love her, and she loves us. You have to fix it. If only it were that simple. At work, James avoided the break room, avoided their shared project spaces, avoided anywhere he might run into Olivia. He buried himself in spreadsheets and data analysis, trying to lose himself in work the way he had before she'd become the center of his world. But Derek found him anyway, appearing at his desk around lunchtime. You look terrible, Derek observed. Thanks. Very helpful. Want to talk about it? No. Olivia looks just as bad. Whatever you two fought about, it's eating both of you alive. Did she tell you what happened? She told me she got a job offer in Seattle and you reacted badly. I reacted badly? James's voice rose slightly. She kept it secret for 3 weeks, and you told her to get out instead of talking it through. James slumped in his chair. She told you that part too? She's my friend. You're both my friends, and watching you two self-destruct is painful for everyone. Derek pulled up a chair. Do you want her to stay? Of course I want her to stay. Then tell her that. Without the anger and accusations, just tell her the truth. I did tell her. She's choosing the job anyway. Did you actually ask her to stay, or did you just make it about how she betrayed you by considering options? The question made James pause. Had he actually asked her to stay, or had he just attacked her decision-making process and made her feel guilty for having ambitions? I need to think, James said. Don't think too long. Seattle jobs don't wait forever. James spent the rest of the day analyzing the situation the way he'd analyze any problem at work. Strip away the emotion, look at the facts, identify possible solutions. Fact 1. Olivia had a career opportunity that would significantly advance her professional goals. Fact 2. James had a daughter whose stability he needed to protect. Fact 3. They loved each other. Fact 4. Love alone didn't solve logistical impossibilities. But what were the actual impossibilities? James forced himself to think past his immediate fear. Long distance wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. People maintained relationships across distance all the time. Seattle was a 3-hour flight. They could video call daily. Visits every few weeks weren't impossible if they planned carefully. The real question was whether James could handle the vulnerability of a long-distance relationship, the uncertainty, the lack of control, and whether he could support Olivia's dreams even when they complicated his carefully ordered life. His phone buzzed, a text from his sister. Emma called me crying, said you and Olivia broke up. What happened? James called her immediately. We didn't break up, we had a fight. About? He explained the situation, the job offer, the argument, the terrible things they'd both said. His sister listened without interrupting, which meant she was taking this seriously. Are you in love with her? She asked when he finished. Yes. Like, genuinely, deeply in love? The kind where you can't imagine your life without her? Yes. Then why are you sitting at your desk instead of fighting for her? Because I don't know how to fight for someone who's leaving. You fight by showing up, by being honest about what you want, by asking her to choose you without making her feel guilty for having dreams. His sister's voice softened. James, you've spent 3 years protecting yourself from risk, but love is risk. And the biggest risk isn't her leaving for Seattle. It's losing her because you were too proud to admit you need her. After they hung up, James sat at his desk for a long time, his sister's words echoing in his head. He'd accused Olivia of making unilateral decisions, but wasn't that exactly what he was doing? Deciding the relationship was over without fighting for it? Assuming she'd chosen the job over him without actually asking what she wanted? James pulled up his email and started typing. The message was simple. Can we talk? Really talk, without anger or accusations. I need to tell you some things. Her response came 10 minutes later. My apartment. Tonight at 7. James left work early, went home to explain to Emma that he was going to try to fix things, and arrived at Olivia's apartment at exactly 7 o'clock with his heart pounding. She answered the door looking exhausted. Her eyes were red, her hair was pulled back messily, and she was wearing sweatpants, something he'd never seen her in before. Thanks for seeing me, he said quietly. Of course. She stepped aside to let him in. They sat on her couch, the same place where they'd had their first real conversation about their feelings months ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on James. I'm sorry, he said before she could speak. I'm sorry for making the fight about me instead of about us. I'm sorry for throwing your ambitions in your face like they were a betrayal. And I'm sorry for telling you to leave when what I really wanted was for you to stay. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry too. I should have told you about the interviews from the beginning. I was scared of your reaction, but that's not an excuse. You deserve to be part of the process. Why were you scared? Because I knew what it would mean. I knew it would force us to confront questions we've been avoiding, questions about where this relationship is actually going. James took her hand. I love you, Olivia. I'm in love with you in a way I didn't know I was capable of anymore. And the thought of you leaving terrifies me because I've built my whole life around protecting myself from being hurt again. I know. But here's what I realized. He took a deep breath. I'm going to get hurt either way. If you leave and we break up, I'm hurt. If you stay and resent me for it, I'm hurt. If I ask you to sacrifice your dreams and you do it, eventually that will hurt both of us. There's no risk-free option here. So what are you saying? I'm saying that if the only variable is pain, then I choose the option where you get to follow your dreams, even if that means Seattle, even if that means long distance, even if it's hard and complicated and scary. Olivia pressed her hand to her mouth, fresh tears falling. You mean that? I mean it. I don't want to be the person who holds you back. I want to be the person who supports you while you achieve amazing things. James squeezed her hand. But I'm asking, really asking, not demanding. Is there any version of this where we stay together, where we try to make it work despite the distance? I want that, Olivia said immediately. I've spent 4 days thinking I'd lost you, and it was the worst 4 days of my life. Worse than the 2 years I spent loving you in silence, because at least then I had hope. You haven't lost me. You could never lose me, Olivia. I'm yours. Whether you're here or in Seattle or on the moon, I'm yours. She laughed through her tears. The moon might be pushing it. Okay, I draw the line at the moon, but Seattle is doable. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having is easy. You taught me that. Olivia shifted closer, curling into his side. I haven't accepted the offer yet. I told them I needed to talk to someone important first. Someone important? You, idiot. You're the important someone. James wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, feeling the rightness of her presence. When do you need to give them an answer? End of the week. That's 2 days. I know, but I also know what my answer is going to be. She pulled back to look at him. I want to take the job, James. It's everything I've been working toward. But I need to know we're going to be okay. I need to know you're not going to resent me for leaving. I won't resent you, I promise. I'm going to miss you desperately, and I'm going to hate every minute we're apart, but I won't resent you for following your dreams. What about Emma? The question made James pause. Emma loves you. She's been crying since our fight because she thinks she's losing you. We'll need to explain this to her carefully. Help her understand that you leaving doesn't mean you're abandoning her. I would never abandon her, or you. I know that. My fear just makes me forget sometimes. They sat together in silence for several minutes, processing what this decision meant. Long-distance relationships were hard. They required trust and communication and constant effort. But James and Olivia had spent 3 years building exactly those skills. We can make this work, Olivia said, like she was trying to convince herself as much as him. We can, James agreed. It won't be the same as having you here every day. But we'll figure it out. We'll video call every night. You'll visit when you can. I'll bring Emma to Seattle during school breaks. You'd do that? Bring Emma to visit? Of course. She needs to see where you live to understand that you're still part of our lives, even from a distance. Olivia kissed him then, soft and desperate and full of promise. I love you so much. I love you too, and I'm going to prove it by being the most supportive long-distance boyfriend in history. That's a high bar. I'm very competitive when properly motivated. They spent the rest of the evening talking through logistics, when she'd move, how often they could visit, how to maintain connection across time zones. It was practical and somewhat unromantic, but it was also necessary. They were building a framework for survival. Thursday night, they sat down with Emma together to explain what was happening. Miss Olivia has an amazing job opportunity in Seattle, James began. It's a really big deal for her career. Emma's face fell immediately. You're leaving? I am, Olivia said gently, pulling Emma onto her lap. But leaving doesn't mean I'm abandoning you. It means I'm going to a new city for work. But you won't be here for pancakes, or bedtime stories, or weekends. Emma's voice was thick with tears. No, I won't be here for those things every week. But I'll visit as often as I can. And your dad said you could come visit me in Seattle sometimes. We could explore a whole new city together. Will you still love us when you're far away? The question broke both James and Olivia's hearts. Yes, Olivia said firmly. Distance doesn't change love, Emma. I'll love you and your dad just as much from Seattle as I do right here. We'll just have to be creative about how we show it. Like video calls? Emma suggested hopefully. Exactly like video calls. We can read bedtime stories over video. We can show each other what we're doing. We can stay connected even when we're apart. Emma seemed to consider this, her 6-year-old brain working through complex adult concepts. Will you come back? I don't know, Olivia answered honestly. The job is permanent, so I'll probably be there for a long time. But I'll visit, a lot. And you'll visit me. We're not saying goodbye, sweetheart. We're just figuring out a different way to be together. Okay, Emma said quietly. I don't like it, but okay. Neither do we, James said. But sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices. That night, after Emma was asleep, Olivia stayed over one more time. They lay in James's bed, tangled together, neither wanting to let go. 2 weeks, Olivia murmured. That's when they want me to start. 2 weeks isn't much time. No, but it's what we have. Those 2 weeks passed in a blur of logistics and emotion. Olivia gave her notice at Morrison & Associates, enduring exit interviews and farewell lunches. She packed her apartment, sorted through 3 years of accumulated belongings, and made arrangements for movers. James helped where he could, showing up after work to wrap dishes in newspaper and label boxes. Emma drew pictures for Olivia to take with her, filling an entire folder with crayon drawings of the three of them together. So you don't forget what we look like, Emma explained seriously. I could never forget what you look like, Olivia assured her, but I'll treasure these forever. The office threw Olivia a going-away party. Derek made an embarrassing speech about how he'd known all along that James and Olivia were perfect together. Their manager praised her contributions and wished her luck. Colleagues who'd watched their relationship develop offered congratulations mixed with sympathy for the distance they'd face. Long distance is tough, one coworker said. But if anyone can make it work, it's you two. James hoped they were right. The night before Olivia's flight, they had one final dinner together. James, Olivia, and Emma. They ordered pizza and watched Emma's favorite movie and pretended everything was normal. But when Emma went to bed, the weight of tomorrow's goodbye settled over them. I don't know how to do this, James admitted. How do I watch you leave without falling apart? You remember that this isn't forever. We're choosing each other, just in a complicated way. What if we can't make it work? What if the distance is too much? Then we'll figure that out when we get there. But James, we have to try. We didn't wait 3 years to be together just to give up after 3 months. You're right. He pulled her close. I'm just scared. Me too, but we're brave enough to do this anyway. They made love that night with an intensity born of impending separation. Every touch felt precious. Every kiss weighted with meaning. Afterward, they lay wrapped around each other, neither willing to sleep and waste their remaining hours together. Thank you, Olivia whispered in the darkness. For what? For letting me go. For supporting my dreams even when it hurts you. For being the kind of partner I didn't think existed. Thank you for loving me despite my fears. For being patient while I figured myself out. For choosing me even when it would be easier not to. At the airport the next morning, Emma clung to Olivia and cried. James's sister had come to take Emma afterward, giving them a few final moments of privacy. This isn't goodbye, Olivia kept repeating, to Emma and to herself. This is just see you later. I love you, Miss Olivia, Emma sobbed. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. When Emma finally let go, James walked Olivia to the security checkpoint. They stood there, both crying now, holding on to each other like they could stop time through sheer force of will. Call me when you land, James said. I will, and we'll video call tonight after Emma's bedtime. Every night? Every single night. I love you, Olivia Bennett. I love you, James Walker. One final kiss, and then she was walking towards security. She looked back 3 times, waving each time, and James waved back until she disappeared from view. The apartment felt empty that night. Too quiet. Too cold. Emma moped through dinner and bedtime, clearly struggling with Olivia's absence. Can we call her now? Emma asked after her bedtime story. Let's give her a few hours to settle in. We'll call before you go to sleep. They video called at 8:30. Olivia answered from her new apartment, which was still mostly empty boxes and bare walls. Hi, she said brightly, clearly forcing cheerfulness. How are my favorite people? Emma told her about school, about the picture she'd drawn that day, about how the apartment felt wrong without her. James watched his daughter talk to the woman they both loved through a screen and felt his heart ache. But he also felt hope, because Olivia was there, smiling and engaged and present despite the distance. Because Emma was already adapting, finding comfort in this new normal. Because love didn't actually require physical proximity to survive. It just required effort. And they had plenty of that. The next few weeks established a new rhythm. Morning texts while James made coffee, and Olivia started her day 3 hours earlier on the West Coast. Lunch check-ins when their breaks aligned. Evening video calls where they'd share their days. Weekend conversations that lasted hours, both of them too reluctant to hang up. Emma joined most of the evening calls, showing Olivia her homework and asking about Seattle. Olivia sent postcards twice a week with drawings and stories about her new city. She mailed Emma a stuffed orca from the aquarium. She video called for bedtime stories when her schedule allowed. It wasn't the same as having her there, but it was something. James's first visit to Seattle came 6 weeks after Olivia left. He flew out alone for a long weekend, his sister watching Emma. The moment he saw Olivia waiting at arrivals, all the distance of the past weeks collapsed. They spent 3 days remembering what it felt like to be in the same physical space. Olivia showed him her new office, her favorite coffee shop, the park she'd discovered. They talked about everything and nothing. They made love with the desperate intensity of people who knew they'd soon be apart again. "I miss you every single day," Olivia confessed on his last night there. "I miss you too. But we're making it work." "Are we? Really? Or are we just delaying the inevitable?" The question surprised him. "Do you want to break up?" "No, never. I'm just scared that we're holding on to something that's slowly dying from distance." James took her face in his hands. "Listen to me. We are not dying. We're adapting. And yes, it's hard. Yes, I hate that I can't kiss you goodnight every evening or wake up next to you on weekends. But Olivia, you're thriving in this job. I can see it in your eyes. And that makes the distance worth it. What about you? Are you thriving?" "I'm surviving, which is all I need to do until we figure out the next step." "What is the next step?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out together." 3 months after Olivia moved, Emma visited Seattle for the first time during spring break. She was nervous on the plane, gripping James's hand and asking repeated questions about turbulence and safety. But when Olivia met them at baggage claim and Emma ran into her arms, all the anxiety melted away. They spent a week exploring Seattle together, the Space Needle, Pike Place Market, the aquarium, parks and museums, and restaurants. Olivia had planned every day meticulously, wanting to show Emma her new city and make her feel included in this new chapter. "Do you like it here?" Emma asked one night at dinner. "I do," Olivia said. "It's different from home, but it's starting to feel comfortable." "Is it your home now, or is home still where we are?" The question was more complex than a 6-year-old could understand. Olivia met James's eyes over Emma's head before answering. "I think people can have more than one home," she said carefully. "Seattle is becoming home because I live here, but you and your dad are home too, in a different way. Home is where the people you love are." "So we're always home to each other?" "Exactly." That night, after Emma was asleep in Olivia's guest room, James and Olivia sat on her balcony overlooking the city. "She's adjusting better than I expected," James said. "Kids are resilient." "So are we, apparently." Olivia leaned against him. "I got a promotion. My boss told me yesterday." "That's amazing. Why didn't you lead with that?" "Because it comes with a decision. They want me to take on more responsibility, which means longer hours and more commitment to Seattle long term." "What did you say?" "I said I needed to discuss it with my partner." The word partner made James's heart skip. They'd never formally labeled what they were beyond boyfriend and girlfriend, but partner felt more serious, more permanent. "Do you want the promotion?" he asked. "Yes, but I want you more, and I keep waiting for you to ask me to come home." James turned to face her fully. "Is that what you want? To come home?" "I don't know. I love this job. I love the challenges and the opportunities, but I miss you. I miss Emma. I miss our life." "Our life is wherever we are," James said. "Right now, part of it is in Seattle and part is where Emma and I are. That's not ideal, but it's reality." "For how long? We can't do this forever, James." "No, we can't, which is why I've been thinking about something." "What?" He took a deep breath, about to say something he'd been considering for weeks but had been too scared to voice. "What if Emma and I moved to Seattle?" Olivia's eyes widened. "What?" "Not immediately. Emma needs to finish the school year, and I'd need to find a job here, which could take time. But what if that's the solution? You're building something important here. Maybe instead of asking you to give that up, we should figure out how to join you. You'd uproot Emma? After everything you said about stability? Stability is important, but so is family. And Olivia, your family. You have been for a long time. Maybe it's time we stopped pretending distance is sustainable and actually built a life together. Tears streamed down Olivia's face. You'd really move here? For me? For us? For all three of us? Because I don't want to raise Emma thinking that love means sacrifice and distance. I want to raise her seeing that love means choosing to be together, even when it's complicated. What about your job? I can find another job. Tech companies exist in Seattle. And honestly, Morrison and Associates was never my dream. It was just stable. But stability without you feels empty. Olivia kissed him then, deep and desperate and full of hope. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Well, except maybe loving you. I'm very sure about that. They talked into the early morning hours, planning a future that had seemed impossible weeks ago. James would start job searching immediately. They'd look at neighborhoods with good schools for Emma. Olivia would help him navigate the Seattle market. They'd take it one step at a time, but they'd take those steps together. The next morning at breakfast, they told Emma, "We're moving to Seattle?" Emma's eyes went wide. "Not right away," James clarified, "but probably in a few months, after school ends. How would you feel about that?" Emma looked between them, processing. "Would we live with Miss Olivia?" "Eventually, yes," Olivia said, "if that's okay with you." "Can I have my own room?" They laughed. "Yes, you can have your own room. And we'd be together all the time, like a real family?" "We're already a real family," James said. "But yes, we'd be together all the time." Emma grinned. "Okay, that's good. I like that." It took 4 months to make it happen. James interviewed remotely for positions in Seattle, eventually accepting an offer from a tech company doing similar work to what he'd done at Morrison and Associates. Olivia helped him find an apartment, a 3-bedroom place with enough space for all of them and a small yard where Emma could play. Emma finished first grade with a tearful goodbye to her friends and promises to video call. James's sister helped them pack and ship their belongings, crying the entire time but insisting she was happy for them. "You're doing the right thing," she told James the night before they left. "Choosing love over fear. I'm proud of you." "I'm terrified." "Of course you are, but you're brave enough to do it anyway." Their first night in Seattle, in their new apartment with boxes stacked everywhere and Emma asleep in her new room, James and Olivia collapsed onto their new couch. "We did it," Olivia said, sounding amazed. "We actually did it." "We did, though I'm not sure what we did. Created chaos, complicated our lives beyond reason. Built a life together. Finally." She turned to look at him. "No more distance. No more screen calls instead of goodnight kisses. Just us." "Just us," James agreed, "in this terrifying new city where I know approximately 3 people. You know Emma and me. That's enough to start with." He kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. "I love you. And I choose you. Every day, I choose you. I choose you too." 6 months later, on a Saturday morning, while Emma was at a friend's house, James stood in their now-furnished living room, looking at the life they'd built. Olivia was in the kitchen making coffee, humming to herself. Sunlight streamed through windows that overlooked a city that was starting to feel like home. Photographs dotted the shelves, the 3 of them at the Space Needle, Emma's first day at her new school, James and Olivia at a company event for her job. He pulled a small box from his pocket, turning it over in his hands nervously. "Coffee's ready," Olivia called. James walked into the kitchen where she was pouring 2 mugs, his with excessive cream, hers black with 2 sugars. Some things never changed. "Hey," he said softly. She looked up, immediately noticing something in his expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. That's actually the problem." "That doesn't make sense." "I know. Let me try again." He took a breath. 3 years ago, I made a joke in a conference room. I said we should just get married so we'd be legally obligated to survive corporate nightmares together. Olivia's hand stilled on her coffee mug. I remember. You cried because you'd been waiting for me to see you, really see you, and I'd been too scared and blind to notice. James, let me finish. He pulled out the small box, opening it to reveal a simple ring. I'm not joking this time. I'm not exhausted or delirious or trying to be funny. I'm completely serious when I say, Olivia Bennett, will you marry me? Tears filled her eyes immediately. You're proposing? I'm proposing because you're already my partner in everything that matters, because you left everything familiar to follow your dreams, and I followed you because my dreams included you. Because Emma asks me at least once a week when we're going to make it official. He smiled. Because I love you. Not despite the complications or the distance we survived or the risks we took, but because of all of it. Because everything that makes us complicated also makes us real. Yes, Olivia whispered. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around him, both of them laughing and crying simultaneously. I thought you'd never ask, she said, echoing her words from that conference room so long ago. I almost didn't. I was too busy being scared. What changed? Everything. You changed everything. He kissed her softly. You taught me that the safest choice isn't avoiding risk. It's choosing the right person to take risks with. They stood in their kitchen, in their shared home, in the city they'd chosen together, holding on to each other and the future they'd fought so hard to build. Later, when they picked Emma up and told her the news, she squealed with delight. Does this mean we can have a wedding with a big cake? It means exactly that, Olivia promised. And I can be in it? You'll be the most important person there, right next to your dad. Emma threw her arms around both of them. This is the best family ever. That night, after Emma was asleep, James and Olivia sat on their balcony overlooking Seattle, Olivia's ring catching the city lights. Do you ever think about that conference room? Olivia asked. About how different things could have been if I hadn't broken down and confessed everything. All the time. We wasted 3 years being scared. We didn't waste them. We built a foundation. She leaned against him. Everything that came after only worked because we'd already spent 3 years learning to be partners. You're probably right. I'm definitely right. James laughed, wrapping his arm around her. I love you. Have I mentioned that recently? Once or twice, but I don't mind hearing it again. I love you, Olivia. My best friend, my partner, my future wife. I love every complicated, beautiful, terrifying part of this life we've built. I love you too. And I love that we were brave enough to choose each other, even when it was hard. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights, thinking about conference rooms and accidental proposals, and the journey from friendship to something infinitely more precious. The presentation they'd been working on that fateful Thursday night had helped them land the client. It had been successful by every professional metric, but the real success had been the conversation that followed, the confession that changed everything, the joke that became a promise. James hadn't meant to propose that night, exhausted and overwhelmed in a room full of scattered papers. But looking back, he'd meant every word. He'd just been too scared to realize it. Now, with Olivia wearing his ring and Emma asleep in the next room and a future full of possibilities stretching before them, that fear felt like a distant memory. Some risks were worth taking, some people were worth fighting for, and some love stories started with friendship, survived distance, and ended with forever. This was one of those stories.